Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement. Welcome back, everybody. And in particular today, I want to say welcome to the mamas, but also maybe the fathers who will be listening this week, because today I'm interviewing Jeremy Macvean, who is one of the founders of the Fatherhood here in Australia. This is a movement, an education community, and a group of dads who are really wanting to change the way fathers are supported and educated around their really important role, which is so amazing because every week here on this podcast for many years, and in my personal life for the last 15 years, I have been so passionate about matrescence because it really makes us look at how we can value and support and see mothers differently in the home, but also in workplaces in our communities. And what I know for sure is that we need to do that for the dads too. We need to do that for the non-birthing parents as well. If we're really going to change the system around how we support mothers, we have to also really change the system of how we support fathers and non-birthing parents. And Jeremy is doing just that. In particular, I wanted to talk to him about how they're going into workplaces here in Australia and talking to organisations around making fatherhood more visible, making it okay to take paternity leave and to make it possible for dads to be role models in workplaces so new fathers can bravely also take time off work and have flexible working hours and be seen to be dads in our world. This is such an exciting conversation, and please share it with your partners, your colleagues, your brothers, your next door neighbours, so we can all be out there championing this change. Welcome back, everybody. This is our series focusing on partners' experiences of becoming a parent, if there really is something called matrescence. And today I'm really excited about the conversation I'm about to have with Jeremy Macvean. He is the co-founder of the Fatherhood. He's also got a background in marketing and works with men's mental health charity, Movember, is a single dad to 3 girls, and this is a conversation I know is really important and powerful and an insight that I don't think we've had here before. So thank you for being here and for being a part of this.
Great to be here, Amy. I love talking about this stuff, so looking forward to getting into it.
Oh, me too. We're in our happy place with these conversations. So start off with how you, Aussie bloke, ends up going into this space of not only mental health for men, but in particular around fatherhood, and what your experience of becoming a dad was like.
Yeah, well, where the fatherhood started, it was me and Luke and Andrew. We were working together, actually, colleagues, and discussing life at home. You know, over the weekend, those conversations over coffees, like how'd you go on the weekend and how you're holding up, and we're having these conversations and realised that we were involved. We were really involved dads and reflective of this shift that's happening around us, where fathers of this generation are spending 3 times as many hours with their kids than just one generation ago. So there's a lot happening out there. And we could see that in our conversations. But we're marketing and media people by trade, the 3 of us. Luke used to be the editor of Men's Health magazine, and Andrew's been a writer for GQ magazine and all sorts of stuff, and obviously with my Movember background as well. And we just looked around us and saw that shift wasn't reflected in the media, particularly in the world around us, this rise of the hands-on dad and involved fathers. So you look around at the websites, fantastic resources, Babyology, Mamma Mia, Essential Baby. A lot of these resources were leaning towards mothers, And we felt that wasn't reflective of what we were seeing in our own experiences. So without any business planning, there wasn't a lot of thinking about it. We just thought, well, why don't we do it? Let's have a crack at it. And that gave birth to the Fatherhood. And we
Mm.
created the website at the-father-hood.com and social media handles and all that stuff. And the response to it was fantastic. Just this, there's a lot of people out there that saw themselves in what we were doing with the Fatherhood. And from any gendered perspective, whether it's dads going, oh, thank you. And also, I've got to say, if not equally, if not more so, it was
Mm-hmm.
mothers saying, thank you. And yes, and we need to celebrate this and we need to move forward in this space. And so, at least equal, if not more, it was mums getting behind what we were doing.
That's it. I mean, I've been in this space talking to mothers for over 15 years, and for so long, women have been saying to me, what can I send to my partner? Is there anything like what you do for the dads? And I'm like, no, not really. I've been looking around. It isn't actually there. I'd never heard that statistic before, Jeremy, that they spend 3 times more hands-on time now than just a generation ago. That is a huge cultural
Yeah,
shift in a really quick amount of time.
exactly. We've got amazing things happening around us, and it's happening really rapidly, which is leading to all sorts of shifts that you're tackling in terms of gender norms and how do we show up as individuals. And we're writing the rule book. Not that there's a rule, we're writing the script now as
Mm.
parents today, with often two parents working flexibly off the back of COVID. I mean, COVID was obviously terrible in so many ways, but gee, it's provided an amazing opportunity to increase the rate at which we all work flexibly, particularly dads who are held back with
Yes.
these kind of restricted gender norms of being in the office and feeling like they needed to be the dutiful employee to provide for the family. We're all breaking that apart now. So yeah, there's a huge shift going on around us, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say, "Oh, this is great," and I do this in the talks that we do. It is a great opportunity. It's the best time in history to be a dad. Is one of the topics that we go to workplaces and talk about, because it is. We can, and that's actually a quote from Professor Richard Fletcher, who's at the University of Newcastle and one of the thought leaders in this country regarding involved fathers. And that's what he thinks. It's the best time in history to be a dad. And so we go and talk to dads about that. But it's also really confusing. And so there's competing priorities in all of our lives now. And we need to weigh that up, either individually within ourselves and then communicate it to any co-parents, partners we might be sharing the load with, to work out how we want to show up as people and how we manage this without a clear score. You know, if back a generation ago, simplifying things, if you were a dad and you earned a good crust as a provider and kind of turned up once or twice to pick the kids up from footy, you were probably thinking you were doing a good job.
You're the hero.
And now
Exactly.
yeah, that's right. Oh,
Yeah.
well done. Well, now that's shifted, and we've got to work out what success looks like for us as individuals. Is it an amazing career? Is it looking after the kids? Is it a combination of both? Being a good partner, being a good son, being a good... And that's what, and in many ways, the way that we talk to dads about it is many mothers have been bearing this load for a really long time. So welcome to the party. It's like
Yeah,
it's
that's it.
bringing a lot of dads up to speed with this
Mm,
competing priorities, and that's
mm.
exciting to kind of support that change for the benefit of all.
I'd love to talk about, your experience and what you're hearing from dads in a moment. But first, can we talk about the workplace? Because just recently, this podcast will be released in a few months, but just last night, I did a global summit online with women all over the world about what we want the world to know about how the pandemic impacted being a mum. And one of the things that came up a lot, Jeremy, was this resentment that built in a relationship because the male partner, so often kind of went to one part of the house and closed the door and needed to work. And the mother had to manage it in a completely different way. And what I've heard over and over again is he doesn't want to do that necessarily. He would love to be able to be more flexible. But the assumption around his job is more important, or he can't have the kids screaming in the background, whereas she could, was such a source of stress, relationship problems through the pandemic. And I think it's so good for us to know and remember that not only are we trying to change this individually like you are, but also our workplaces treat mothers and fathers very differently. And we saw that so clearly in the pandemic. What do you hear and see around this?
Oh, lots, absolutely. So that's actually why the Fatherhood, as I said, we started as a website and email and out to dads, like social media chats and things like that. And now we've focused all of our efforts on the workplace because
Mm,
it is the factory of these gender relations. So we can go into workplaces and hold workshops with anyone. We can do dad-focused things or for anyone and talk about this shift to
mm,
drive the individual change within people, and the biases that we all hold, and the cultural change within organisations to make it feel safe for men to step into this role of being a carer because it hasn't felt safe. And I feel passionate about this because I've lived it and I still live it today. And so this is why I get excited off the change that COVID's brought. If we go back 5 years or so, if I dropped my kids at school and turned up at work at 9:30 or 10, I would feel like all eyes were on me. I'm a bad employee and, oh, this isn't great. Whereas now I'll walk into an office at the same time and not think twice about it because we're coming and
wow.
going in a new way. So it presents this real opportunity for men to show up in that way that they didn't feel they had permission to prior. And one
Yeah.
example that when I'm talking to dads in workshops, we talk about to bring them on this journey that you can actually be a father and present at work, and that's okay. Men have often tried to separate their lives. And I experienced that going back to when I first became a dad. My partner was showing obviously for 9 months and everything shifts for her. For me, I was just going to work normally,
Mm.
and backing off interstate travel in the few weeks before we were due because I didn't want to miss a birth. That was about as impacted
It's
I
so
was.
true.
All
Yeah.
right. And so
Mm.
her life totally shifted. There was no denying the fact that everything was about to change for her. But as a guy, I just kind of shielded it a little bit and went on with on my merry way. So the workplace wasn't expecting me to be changing the way that I worked. And so what we talk about with dads is when you've got the Zoom on the Microsoft Teams call and there's the Brady Bunch faces on the screen, and it's happened to all of us, and a kid busts into the room. And for me, I was presenting to a board and my kids turned up to tell me that they'd run out of toilet paper mid presentation. And it's happened to everyone. And we've all seen it. And see, what we talk to dads about is capture that moment. Next time it happens, look, guarantee all the faces on the screen will warm up because they
Mm.
see the full human. And as I can say from my perspective, it's almost like, oh my God, like I've sort of diminished my professionalism. But we use that as an example and a tool to say you can turn up in that way and people will warm to you. It actually enhances a lot of people's perception of the human that you are, and it doesn't disadvantage you at work. Because
Yeah.
this creates the reason that's important is there's been fantastic work done in terms of the provision of paid parental leave and trying to create a level playing field. We're still not there, but create more of a level playing field. Companies are coming to the fatherhood and saying, can you come and talk to us because we put this leave provision in place and the dads aren't taking it.
Yeah. That's right.
What? We need to make it safe for them. And we've got a long, long way to go on that front. There is a great opportunity, but a long way to go.
Yes. I mean, the activist in me who's been doing this for 15 years is like, welcome to what it's been like for us. We did walk into the workplace at 9:30 a.m. and feel like all eyes were on us and telling us that, you're
Yeah.
late. So in a way, it is bringing both of the experiences of parenthood to the same level finally. I think this is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you say is that that's what we were experiencing for a long time because it was assumed we would do the drop off or pick up. And the dads felt like they couldn't because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for us to feel like we could do it either. We just had to. And now we're
Yeah.
in a position where all of us need to be able to do this and all of us need to feel safe. And I think beyond that, like you beautifully said, to show up fully human in our workplaces is also something I think is the potential out of these conversations. So for even for people who don't have kids, but maybe they're looking after an elderly parent or a pet or what, we're starting to create workplaces, I hope, where we are seeing people more as a human rather than a robot. And I think that's the potential from these conversations.
Yeah, who wants to be led or work with a robot? No, I don't.
Exactly.
And like you're saying, it's not just caring for children, it's caring for any human or any, we've all got responsibilities in our lives outside of work. So it's allowing people to show up as their full selves. And
Yeah.
going back to what you said, like absolutely, the reason we're so passionate about this is there's an unacceptable pay gap that exists um, in the world, in this country now. And what happens with the pay gap, without getting into the details, but the pay gap is there's a gap from the age of 25 onwards between the genders.
Mhm.
When they become parents, the gap increases hugely.
Yeah,
So that's why we're going after it, to make it better for everyone by
that's right.
leveling this playing field. And at the
Mm.
moment, there's a conscious or unconscious bias, like you're saying, that mothers tend to carry that load, which they still do. All the stats are there. The domestic load is carried more by mothers in heterosexual relationships. Well, we need to address that to address flow-on effects, and the pay gap's right there. So it's about
Yeah.
providing everyone the choices to level the playing field for the benefit of everyone.
Mm. So you speak a lot about making it feel safe for the dads to do this in the workplace. So it's exciting that workplaces are approaching you and saying, hey, we recognize we're trying to put the leave in there, but they're not taking it. What do the dads say about what they need to feel safe? I'm assuming things like role modeling of turning up, and taking that leave. But beyond that, like what do dads and fathers need to feel supported and able to take on more of this role?
Yeah. They talk to us a lot about this. It's a lovely thing after the presentations. They'll come up and have a chat. And I do want to actually start by saying, to be very, very clear, it's a very privileged position for society to be middle
Mm.
class, white guy. So there's no
Yeah,
kind
thank
of
you for
suggestion
acknowledging
that,
that too. Mm.
yeah, so it's not, we need support or they need support. It's driving safety to provide the change to the benefit of everyone. That's what we're about with the fatherhood. And so what they will say, yes, you nailed it. So role modeling, the fact that this Jeremy guy from the Fatherhood's in talking, that's a start, because like, oh right, we can talk about our stuff, because we're used to, a lot of the guys will say we want to focus on everyone else because we're in this privileged position. So the fact that there is a session focused on their role and the shift in it is a really big starting point, because it's like a recognition across the organisation of this matters for the benefit of all of us. And there's the systematic things that we've referred to, so the leave being made available. But the most important thing is the cultural shift. Leaders leading. And when someone does take parental leave or leave on Thursday night to coach their kids' sport team, whatever they need to do, celebrating it
Mm.
publicly is
Mm.
really important. So either role modeling themselves or celebrating it and encouraging. Those type of things go a really long way, so that then we all notice. We all notice when so-and-so goes off on parental leave and they come back 6 months later to the same job or better. We notice. And we got... And another thing I do want to, this is a significant shift, like a huge shift in one generation. It takes
Huge.
reinforcement. It is going to take constant reinforcement to go, this is the way we are today. And it's not like your dad, and it's not like your dad's dad. And so, yeah, we talk about equality in a relationship is with your partner, not compared to your dad, because it's changed
Mm.
so significantly. So that's the goal, guys, is to actually look around. And when we do workshops with dads, it's like, oh, no, okay, yeah, so you show up and you do these things. Do you really share the load? Do you really know when the dentist appointments are and when the birthday present needs to be bought for the weekend and all that stuff? And I can say this with experience. I went through a marriage split over 4 years ago now and share my daughter's 50-50. And I'm now 100% 50-50 sharing the load. It's black and white. Going back 5 years, I wasn't. And you
Mm.
can see that. Like, I can then talk to the dads about that and go, there's those details,
Mm.
changing the bed sheets, whatever it might be, those little things that it takes to run a
That's it.
home, that you need to be, that's where we're headed, and get involved.
Yeah, and I think it's great that we keep acknowledging how huge a leap this is in such a short amount of time, and because that like there's a level of compassion and understanding here that this is unprecedented and it's new. I'll pop the details in the show notes, but I often refer to a university study, a research study done in America, where they interviewed couples before they had their first baby, like, current, modern, awesome, very equal in their expectations from each other before they went into the first birth, and asked questions around who would do the majority of the caring, how's housework going to be managed, who's going to take time off work when the kid is sick. And the intentions were so clear at the beginning that this was going to be shared. And then they went back a year and 5 years later, and it was completely not. And what I love about that research was that it's not necessarily that the awareness and the intention isn't there. It's just that the system around us doesn't support that. And also, I wonder if you could talk to me a little bit about this, Jeremy, especially with your background in mental health, men's mental health. There is also such an identity shift when you become a father, just like there is when we become a mother. And sometimes we almost unconsciously revert back to what we saw our dads do, I'm assuming. We almost unconsciously think, I'll just work. While the baby's little, there's not much I can do anyway, so my job is to work. And I think that is going to be a big shift too, because it is a very conscious thing that you have to catch yourself on. I wonder if you could reflect on that.
Oh, for sure. That resonates very strongly what you're saying there. So I remember the moment. I was downstairs at the Women's Hospital in Melbourne, which I ended up working at, believe it or not, in the years to come. The day after my first daughter was born, I was going down to get a coffee, standing in the queue, and it just went bam and hit me. The realisation that I was a father and I was responsible for the well-being of my family, and the responsibility I felt. It was just like this moment of, wow, what just happened? I mean, extraordinary experience, obviously, being involved in childbirth in that way, and it was overwhelming. And this thing which kicks in, it's built within us, lots of this stuff unconsciously, and from a lot of masculine perspective, it's provide. We've been told to provide over many, many years, and as you said, role modeled previous generations. And so that hit me for sure. I must provide, I must protect and provide, and all that kind of old school traditional way of thinking. I wasn't thinking I must be emotionally present. It wasn't the first thought. It was other things were the first thought. And that's, again, why it's so important we think about change. We're not going to change these fantastic qualities within us. And we don't want to. What a beautiful quality it is to say, I want to protect and provide and nurture. They're really good things. But it's shifting what we mean by that is the opportunity to say to men in particular,
Yes.
you providing doesn't necessarily mean earning a good crust. It's part of it. It's part of the gig, but providing is lots of other stuff and providing for your family. So that's, again, what we talk to dads about, is reframing the way that we think about providing being a key component of, from my own perspective and the dads that we talk to, this sort of thing that kicks in when you become a parent. Another thing I want to go back onto, about 2 weeks prior to that moment, I was over the road doing one antenatal class that the dads go to. Mums tend to go to stacks of them, dads go to one. And I was sitting there, and the guy who ran the session was fantastic. He said, look, in a couple of weeks' time, you're going to be over the road and you're going to have a baby. And if I've got one tip for you, if you want to know how to be a good dad, have a crack. And it just hit me. So we're all sitting there just in like a group of dads. And he said, you see what? So when you're over the road in 2 weeks' time and they're teaching you how to bath your baby, she doesn't know more than you at that point. And when they're teaching you how to change your nappy, she doesn't know more than you. So if you just roll your sleeves up and have a crack and get involved, then you don't have this skill gap. That then you don't become, like we say in the fatherhood, you're not mum's assistant. You don't become this sort of helper of the primary carer at home. You're in there. And so it changed the way I thought about parenting from that moment. Okay, I can do that. I can have a crack. I can roll my sleeves up and have a go. And that's why lots of people say, and I strongly believe in this, equal parental leave is so important. Because if dads are going back to work after a couple of weeks, which happened in my world, then the mums are at home and they're building all these skills. They know how they like to do stuff. They become the lead at home. And dads slip into this assistant mode. that then plays on forever and creates all these sorts of dynamics. So that is why setting up that dynamic, like I said, the intention at the start and then the systems sort of push us into these roles, like you were saying, Amy. That's why it's really important for these systems to be in place, the cultures to be in place, because the greatest of intent gets pulled away unless we have those systems enhancing that intent to be lived and the cultures making it feel safe. So,
Oh,
yeah, we're coming a long way, but yeah.
hallelujah. I love that you've said that so much, because so often in the work that I do, what women say is there was an assumption that I would know how to do this just because I was born female. And I had no bloody idea how to do this either, especially again, when some of us, when we became parents, it's the first time we've held a baby. We're not growing up in a village anymore. I don't have my sister's kids next to me and my cousin's kids down the road. And, we don't have that village of mothering. And so, like you said, the dad goes back to work and we're at home going, I don't know what that cry means, but we figure it out
Mm.
on the job. And so if the dad's not there for that, that's such a huge, huge gap right from the beginning, which can cause so many feelings. I wonder, does anybody do this well? I heard the other day that somewhere in Scandinavia, I think it is, that they are now, because remote working has worked so well, that they're giving the opportunity for partners to not take the parental leave straight away so that one parent works and one doesn't, over the first 12 months, but the dad can work from home for the first 6 months. So he's still working, but he's there. He's not leaving each day. He's sort of in the vicinity, and that's starting to have quite a bit of success.
It is. So there are countries, like you said, Scandinavia, that are doing it, leading the way and providing those structural systems to enable this equality. The example I've got is a personal one. The best example I've seen was when I interviewed on a podcast a guy called Ashley, who's based in Sydney. He leads a foundation called Rainbow Families. Father of two girls, him and his male partner have got two kids, similar-ish age to mine. And it was such a fantastic conversation because the way that he and his partner decide on their roles as parents has no traditional gender bias pulling in
Yeah, of
different directions.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, so they could have this blank canvas conversation as two guys and say, well, do you want to work this next year? You've got this job opportunity and I quite like doing this thing. And it had this flexibility over time and the ability for them. I mean, it was so hard for them becoming a parent and all the stuff they've got to deal with. And that's why that foundation exists, to support same-sex parents with all that's really, really hard. But gee, it was enlightening to think, wow, you don't have to think about, or you aren't bound by gender
Yes.
norms. And to hear the way he and his partner cast their roles over time and just talked about it, for me, I've held on to that because that's what we're working towards, I think. And
Yeah.
there's the
Not being
systems that we're
bound by
talking about.
specific, gender roles or gender
Yeah,
stereotypes.
and it's in us. It's
Yep.
unconscious. It's in the waters that we swim in. But for me, when I was chatting to Ashley, that's the goal. That's what we're working towards. Where in a generation's time, parents of any gender can turn up and decide how they want to show up. And I think that's a challenge to all of us as parents, people listening to this podcast. And the thing that I've held on to is have a crack. That's why a few years ago I started to coach my daughter's netball team. I know nothing about netball. Never played it. I know the rules. Just went, all right, let's do this. It's generally the domain of a mum. I'll give it a go. And that was part of it. Like, let's do that. And what AFL Women's is doing for the challenging gender stereotypes in that sport. So there's really fantastic things happening, which will, in a generation's time, hopefully, move us hugely forward of showing up in parenting roles and caring roles how we want to.
That's it. And especially as a dad of three girls, what we're able to show this next generation, boys and girls, of what parenting looks like. By the time they get to that point, I know, again, the statistic off the top of my head, but if you the research or the stats on how many current 20-year-olds want to have children is actually decreasing in Australia. It's like they've looked at the generations beforehand and gone, nah, why would I want to do that? My career will never recover. It's, they've looked and they've seen what the impact of this is. I'm hoping we're reversing that now. I'm hoping we're showing that, There's so many gifts and joys of becoming a parent, but it also doesn't have to mean you disappear from the workplace or you're on your emails at 1 a.m. because it's the only way you can prove you're still good at your job. Like, I'm hoping we're heading towards that. And I think we're doing it for the mums. You guys are doing it for the dads, and together we'll change it, I hope.
We are. Together we're changing the expectations in our generation. Like you're saying, we're all role modelling for the generation to come. And my three girls see dad half involved. So whatever type of relationship they decide to get into one day, I hope that they'll see that play out. And these things are subconscious. This role modelling that happens, it's embedded in us from a young age, and it's hard to undo quickly. Like we're saying, it takes lots of work and lots of constant reinforcement. But jeepers, role modelling goes a long way to change those expectations. So it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for what you do in the workplace and for dads. We'll put all of the details in the notes for this podcast. And like I've said with all of these series, share it with your partner. Sometimes these conversations are hard to have between the two of you, especially if things aren't feeling equal or great. And so even just flicking a podcast episode like this and pointing to the work of the Fatherhood and other places like that is it just opens the door for a conversation around how we might be able to do it better. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Great to be here. I love talking about this stuff and supporting dads step into the opportunity and help them through it as well, because it's not easy. It's hard. We're all working and managing competing priorities, so it's a juggle. But yeah, love talking about it because we've just got this great chance to do it a bit differently.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mamarising.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, if you would like to be a coach, a facilitator and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator Training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.